Good morning. Paul Boyce. I am CEO and President of PWGC, and welcome to our monthly podcast, The Environmental Echo. Today we have a really exciting guest, a guy I've been trying to get on here for quite a while now, and someone I've known for a little bit of time, and he's a lifetime Long Islander like myself. We have Jeff Szabo, the CEO of the Suffolk County Water Authority, with us today. But before we begin, I just want to reach out to our listeners and let them know that if you guys are interested in getting a hold of us or contacting us, the best way to do so is through our website, which is www.pwgrosser.com/podcast. If you guys have questions, comments, ideas, thoughts, or you think of anyone you want to be a guest or topics, please share the information with us. We'll get back to you. We're very excited about this. And let's just jump into today's guest. We have, again, Jeff Szabo, CEO of the Suffolk County Water Authority. He's been in that current position since 2010, huh? Wow. Longer than I thought, which is great. And just so you know, the Suffolk County Water Authority is Suffolk County's largest municipal public water supplier. It's serving 1.2 million residents of Suffolk County with clean, safe drinking water, of which I am a resident and consumer of that water, and I will testify that it is excellent, okay? Some of the achievements that Jeff's had during his tenure with the Water Authority is the development of the utility's first long-term strategic business plan, which identifies key objectives to transform Suffolk County Water Authority's operations over a 10-year period, which includes completion of the transition to automated meter reading technology. I got to jump in and say something real quick. You know, I love it. I appreciate it. But I used to call in and get that dollar off my bill. I mean,
that all the time.
No more of that, right? But the automated stuff has been terrific. Implementation of a mobile workforce technology, which I hope he'll share a little bit of that with us today. Development of long-term sustainable water supply plans for vulnerable areas. Development of new treatment methods for emerging contaminants, and conducting vulnerability assessments of critical facilities, among other objectives. Jeff was also the architect of the creation of the Long Island Commission of Aquifer Protection, LICAP, which that has an annual report. I know PW Grosser, we were involved in that in the early beginning with some of the geothermal stuff, and perhaps we'll talk a little bit about that. But the LICAP is a study and the annual reports. It's a bi-county effort to identify threats to Long Island's sole source aquifer and provide a blueprint for regional management of Long Island's groundwater resources. He's been past chairman of that organization, and I remember those days, you know, back when it started. Jeff also serves on the National Drinking Water Advisory Council, which provides recommendations pertaining to the Safe Drinking Water Act to the United States EPS, the Environmental Protection Agency. And he's on the board of directors of the Association of Metropolitan Water Agencies. Now, that's something I don't know anything about, which could be interesting.
About that,
good.
Sure.
He's also, it goes on and on here. He's chairman of the Legislative Committee, and additionally, he serves as chairman of the Central Pine Barrens Advisory Committee. And under his guidance, has received multiple awards for various organizations honoring Suffolk County Water Authority's performance and commitment to the environment. And I want to welcome Jeff to the show today. Thank you, Jeff. We're very glad to have you here. That is quite a long list of accomplishments.
It's quite a long intro, Paul.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be a guest today and to talk a little bit about the Suffolk County Water Authority.
Terrific. And again, we're really excited to have you here. Here on the Environmental Echo, we're going to stick to mostly to environmental topics, but if we tend to drift off a little bit, don't be afraid to dive right in, okay? But speaking of diving right in, let's get to our first, topic at hand. We mentioned emerging contaminants in your introduction. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that's affecting the Water Authority these days?
Sure, absolutely. So the Suffolk County Water Authority has a state-of-the-art laboratory on Motor Parkway in Hauppauge, and we test for over 400 chemical compounds. That's about 250 more than we are required to. We're very proud of that. I wish I could take credit and say it was something that I initiated during my tenure as chief executive, but they've been actually doing it for probably close to 30 years. So we test for more compounds than asked by the EPA or the State Health Department, and we're proud of that. And I think that all of the data that we collect is provided to our customers. It's available on our website, and it allows the residents of Long Island and people who are customers of the Suffolk County Water Authority to know exactly what is in their drinking water. Emerging compounds, the New York State Department of Health has been extremely aggressive in looking to see what is found in drinking water across New York State. And the last several years, they have set maximum contaminant levels, which is an MCL, which is the highest amount that a compound could be detected at before it needs to be removed by treatment for compounds like 1,4-dioxane and PFOA and PFOS. And that was sort of spearheaded through the Governor Cuomo at the time. Governor Cuomo's Drinking Water Quality Council that meets on a regular basis to set new standards. So they've addressed 1,4-dioxane, PFOA, PFOS, and in 2022, they're seeking to expand and to put additional regulations for other compounds within that perfluorinated family of chemicals. So we expect additional regulations to come. The good thing is, if there is a good thing, is that PFOA and PFOS, they are removed by traditional, approved, well-known treatment methods like granule activated carbon. And when we talk about carbon, I guess the best way to explain this to the listeners would be, some folks in their home, in their refrigerator, they may have a Brita filter.
Yep.
Right. A Brita filter, it's carbon. Sometimes you'll see, little charcoal specks that appear in your water, typically from the filter. Take that and multiply it by, a couple of thousand.
Yep.
And it's essentially running, carbon through water before it gets out into the distribution system and into residents' homes, into to their faucet. So carbon will remove most of the PFOA, PFOS. On the 1,4-dioxane side, it was a lot more difficult because at the time of the regulation being set, there was no approved treatment method, and that left us, that left us in a position where we knew that the regulation was likely to occur. So years before the MCL was set for dioxane, the engineering staff at the Water Authority, at my direction and our board support, working with outside consultants, developed an advanced oxidation process and after years-long discussions with both the local health department and the state health department, it was finally approved, and the system was put into operation at one of our well fields, and it's effectively removing dioxane from drinking water. So it's a good thing.
Yeah.
We're moving in the right direction. The issue that we're dealing with now is that dioxane is detected across both Nassau and Suffolk County. And there are literally hundreds of wells that have detections of it. And our job is to remove it. We didn't put it there, but it's our job to remove it. So we've been deploying these AOP reactors at various sites throughout our service territory as other
and
drinking.
AOP stands for?
AOP is advanced oxidation.
Yep.
So it's essentially UV lighting, a tube with UV lighting at a very high temperature that destroys dioxane before it goes into a granular activated carbon treatment system and then out to the distribution system for consumption. But we've been working with the state where we've made it our number one priority to get these reactors in place, delivered, and operational as soon as possible.
Wow. And this is no small undertaking. I mean, you guys have probably around 600 wells countywide, active wells, right? And so I assume a bunch of them are going to be required to have this type of treatment. And it's going to be not a small undertaking, either physically or financially, correct?
Absolutely. So our well field spread from Melville in the west to Montauk in the east. And there are easily 60 wells that would need to get treatment on to comply with the standard and half the standard. So the Water Authority not only treats to the regulation of 1 part per billion for dioxane, but we treat to half the standard, and we do that with most of our organic chemical compounds to ensure that if there are spikes, right, there are samples taken at well fields routinely. And dioxane is something that the levels could fluctuate, and we're constantly checking to ensure that we're meeting the standards. But if there is a fluctuation and it moves from below half the standard to above half the standard, we know that the treatment will be in place to remove it before it gets out to the drinking water customers.
Wow. I mean,
and the cost, Paul, you talked about the cost. We can't minimize the cost. Potentially, hundreds of millions of dollars, certainly close to $1 billion for Nassau and Suffolk County. And that's, if you look at not only the capital construction cost, but also the long-term operating cost.
Yeah, the O&M, right.
It's absolutely, it sort of blows your mind a little bit. So we do have litigation that we've initiated against the manufacturers of these chemicals. We're hoping that we're successful, but that will have to run its course, and that may be a couple of years before we have anything definitive on that front.
And we'll need treatment long before then, right?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So what did we have to do? Regrettably, a couple of years ago, we instituted a water quality treatment charge to specifically pay for the treatment associated with emerging compounds. It is a $20 quarterly charge to all of our customers. We weren't happy about it, but we needed the funds to get treatment in place as quickly as possible. Our desire is to treat to zero, right? To remove it, all of these compounds completely from drinking water. So we needed the additional funds to do the capital work to get the treatment in place. And it's $80 a year, $20 a quarter. We bill quarterly, and we're hoping that we're victorious in our litigation, and that may provide some relief for our customers.
Well, I still will say, no one's going to be happy when they hear they got a surcharge or a rate increase, regardless. But water is still the most affordable utility here on Long Island, at least in my experience. You look at electric or gas, oil, cable, whatever else is coming into your house, I'm paying a lot more for that. And this is certainly, if not as important, maybe even more important than those other utilities. I can live without cable and internet, maybe not comfortably,
maybe.
Okay? But I sure can't live without water, So that's how important this is. And it's still, to me, the most affordable of all of that stuff. And thank goodness for that, because I also use probably more of it than any of the others.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that. And historically, we've had, relatively low drinking water rates. And we make every effort to keep those rates as low as possible. Annually, we do a review of our revenue and our costs, capital costs and capital budget, and we try to forecast out a little bit, of course, to make sure that we're charging the appropriate amount. The fees that we levy and the service for water is something that the board is very mindful of, and we try to keep as low as possible. But when you have an issue like emerging compounds, that's going to cost, like I said, hundreds of millions of dollars, if not close to $1 billion. That needed to be addressed directly. And we wanted to be very clear with our customers. We set a separate line item on their bill so that they knew it wasn't a consumption fee. It wasn't their quarterly service charge. It was a direct line to address this specific issue so that we can be as transparent as possible.
Yeah, I as a ratepayer for I appreciate it. I'm not complaining at all. It's still the most affordable utility I'm using and relying on, and I've never had any problems. Occasionally you might see some brown water show up when the guys are flushing hydrants and stuff, but I've never had a service interruption. I've always had excellent pressure where I live. Thankfully, I'm down by the bay, so I guess I'm by a low point in the system, which usually helps. And but it's been a pleasure to be a resident in Suffolk County and rely on you guys. Just one last thing before we move off the emerging contaminants. You mentioned, there may be expand the perfluorinated list and stuff like that. But besides like PFOA, PFAS, are there any other contaminants out there that you guys see on the horizon that might be a problem for Suffolk County? For instance, like years ago, or not too many years ago, but a few years ago, it was like pharmaceuticals became like the hot topic, how they go through someone's body, end up, going out to a sanitary system and, ending up potentially in the drinking water. But do you guys see anything else on the horizon we need to be aware of or concerned about?
Well, as I mentioned, we test for more than is required, and we're participate in the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule with the EPA, and that is a list of typically, I think it's between 30 and 40 compounds. So we're collecting a tremendous amount of data. Pharmaceuticals, that's certainly something that a lot of folks are concerned about. There's some talk at the federal level with the EPA and the health department, to look at other compounds as they continue to collect data. I think New York State most definitely will seek to regulate the fluorinated compounds, but as far as anything on the immediate, that we expect to be regulated within the next year or two, nothing comes to mind.
So there's nothing. Okay, that's good to know. And I'm glad to see you guys aren't seeing anything that's troubling in all your additional sampling, which is also a good thing to know. So to move along a little bit, I mentioned earlier, I said the word geothermal. All right, and I know you guys have you're not against geothermal systems. You don't outlaw them. You're not prohibiting them, but there have been in the past some concerns with some of these systems, and I've had the opportunity to come in and talk to the water authority about these types of energy systems for heating and cooling homes, and some of them are closed loop, which that's totally separate, but the open loop systems where people are pumping groundwater and using groundwater, or maybe using another water source that can be of concern. What's the water authority's concern with geothermal systems?
So you're certainly one of the experts when it comes to geothermal. You and your firm, Paul, have done a fantastic job at presenting the environmental benefits of geothermal to residents and to businesses across the region. And we appreciate that. There certainly are benefits. Our concern, and I think the drinking water industry's concern about open loop systems, is the tremendous demand that it places on our infrastructure. And I think that closed loop systems certainly I think are sort of a stand aside, a separate category, and not as detrimental. But the open loop systems, there are certain customers primarily on the east end of our service territory, maybe a large estate that has a geothermal system that could use tens of thousands, if not millions of gallons of drinking water. And our job is to make sure that there is enough supply. And often we have to put in additional infrastructure with boosters and other things to ensure that additional wells to make sure that there's enough water, not only to supply the average resident, but also individuals that have geothermal systems, and that can be a tremendous cost. So the concerns that we have are notification of the systems when they're going in, to ensure that we can ensure that we have enough for all of our customers in the area, and to make sure that there's proper fire protection and things like that.
Oh yeah, 100%. That's something I always try to educate the clients and the developers and the people that are looking to install these things or considering them, is how it affects others. Right? There's it could be the water authority, it could be the local fire district. All of a sudden, they're pumping or they're using water, and maybe not pumping, but using water, and there's not enough pressure in the system to put out a fire down the block. You think somebody's going to realize that and turn their air conditioning off? It's not likely. So it becomes a health or a safety hazard. It's mind-boggling. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that there are ways to certainly to address it. And I think having the conversation and with individuals like yourself and under other industry leaders, I think that that's always beneficial to try to move what is essentially, in many respects, an environmentally positive thing forward.
Good. Yeah, no, that's what we're all about here. So another topic that has been really big in the news, all right, and I suspect it's going to have some effect or impact to you guys, and that is this federal infrastructure bill, right? There's a talk of a lot of money coming down the pipeline. It's passed. It's just now a matter of doling everything out and who it gets doled out to. And I saw in New York State, water-related projects were high on the list, and as they should be, along with roads and bridges and airports and whatnot. But as I said, I need roads to be comfortable and to get to point A to B, but I need water to survive, right?
Absolutely.
So how do you guys expect this to impact the water authority, if at all?
We're very, very optimistic, very excited about the opportunity for a federal infusion of funds. Let's be clear, there really hasn't been, federal assistance of this magnitude for drinking water in many, many years. So a couple of things are happening. You have the state legislature back in 2017, 2018, began to become more aggressive in providing grants for drinking water purposes. across, downstate, upstate, across the entire area. And we've been very successful in submitting applications to the Environmental Facilities Corporation for treatment, for treatment and for improvements. It could be as simple as replacing, a 100-year-old, antiquated water main that certainly needs to get replaced. To provide again, better service, better reliable fire protection. It could be for construction of elevated storage tanks or treatment. So over the last several years, we've been awarded close to $30 million in grant money from the state. So every dollar we get from the state means that our customers are paying less for the improvements that are needed to happen. The federal money, and we're still trying to get the specifics, right? We've had conversations with our federal elected officials, with Senator Schumer's office and members of the congressional delegation, and also with folks from the Environmental Facilities Corporation. So we don't have, we suspect that the process of applying for and receiving grants will be similar to the process that they use for a lot of the state money, which will be through the Environmental Facilities Corporation. There'll be a rating system, there'll be an evaluation period, and then an award. But we're waiting on specific information. But it is historic, and we're going to take every advantage, every opportunity to secure as much funding as possible. Some of the things that we want to do with this money.
I was going to ask, what's your wish list, right?
I figured that that was next. Believe it or not, Paul, there are between 25 and 30,000 Suffolk County residents that are still on private wells, that are not connected to the water authority or the Riverhead Water District or the Hampton Bays Water District. They're still on private wells, and many of those wells are threatened by these emerging compounds. And over the last several years, we have worked very cooperatively with the town of East Hampton and Suffolk County and the state of New York in bringing these folks on private wells and get them connected to the Suffolk County Water Authority. In those instances, there has been either town money or federal or state money or county money to help offset the cost. It's very expensive to lay water main and to connect people to drinking water. So we've developed a plan trying to secure state money and federal money to connect these last 25 or 30,000 people and get them off these private wells that potentially threaten their health and get them clean, safe drinking water.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned that most of them are east, the east end,
right.
The Forks, and I know there's a lot of agriculture out there still, farming, pesticides, fertilizers, not only just PFOA, PFAS type stuff, but
absolutely.
I know we're dealing with a bunch that nitrogen can be an issue. How do you deal with that too?
Fortunately, for us, the nitrogen has come up repeatedly as being a threat to drinking water. Certainly, it is a significant threat to to water, but not to surface water, but not necessarily drinking water. And it's an issue, but it would not be in my top 20 areas of concern. Out of our 600 active wells, we have one well that actually we treat for nitrogen removal out of all 600. But that doesn't mean that nitrogen poses problems, significant problems for surface waters and is a potential threat to the aquifer overall. So those efforts to remove whether it's pesticides or the emerging compounds or nitrogen, I think the health department, the layers of government, they should be applauded for bringing the drinking water issue to the forefront.
Glad to hear that, Jeff. Thank you. So, Long Island, we continue to grow and hopefully prosper. We've come through this pandemic and we're seeing some economic revitalization. Things are hopefully going to get back on track sooner than later. And we've seen some growth. We're seeing inflation and all sorts of other things that we won't get into the politics. But as Long Island grows, right, there's going to be a need for more water, right? And I know right now you guys are meeting capacity and everything else, and it's, but here we are, it's February, it's the dead of winter. You're not pumping as much as water as you normally do, say like in July, August, even into September, when the demand and the usage goes up because everybody loves a green lawn,
That's right.
How do you guys handle that usually when that comes around?
Very good question. So unlike other regions, across the United States, you read the newspaper and the media outlets about, the lack of water availability, right? California, the Southwest,
Oh, yeah.
even sections of the South, Florida, Georgia, where there are, lawsuits and, big, discussions related to the future of available water for domestic use and for consumption. We don't have that issue here in Suffolk County and Nassau County. We have enough water to last several lifetimes. 1,000 years if it stopped raining tomorrow, right? If it stopped raining tomorrow, we would have enough water in the aquifer to last for hundreds, if not thousands of years. That's a good thing. But that doesn't mean that we don't look at trying to ensure that we have it and it's available. So we're constantly looking at our internal infrastructure to see what improvements we need to make to ensure that we have the supply when it is needed. A lot of that will, depend on which section of the service territory you're talking about. Certainly, the demands moving forward into the future are different in Western Suffolk than they are in Eastern Suffolk. I'll bring up a particular project that we're pushing forward at this point. We do supply drinking water to the residents of Southold. And our distribution system in Southold is sort of this, it's been put together over the years with a series of very small drinking water wells with low capacity and small inch diameter water mains, and there's enough supply there, but they also have some issues with the aquifer itself out there. It's not as deep, it's fragile, you have some saltwater intrusion.
Oh, you're getting into my next topic, yeah.
So you have some issues out there, and at times we have struggled with locating property for a potential new well field. And if you do have a piece of property, how much water are you going to be able to take from the aquifer to serve in the area? So we are looking to get some of the federal funds that we just talked about to construct a $30 million pipeline, essentially bringing water from Flanders to, in the Riverhead section over high quality drinking water. It's been there. It's Pine Barrens pure, essentially. It's very high quality. We have, enough there that we can move it from that area in Flanders over to Southold, and that will allow for aquifer restoration and preservation in Southold, which I think is also a very, very beneficial thing long term for the North Fork. So that is that's a significant project. We're in the development stages of and the engineering phase of putting that together. But we think long term, we're bringing water from where we have it to where we need it, and also allowing the aquifer to ease off on the wells that we presently use in Southold eventually, so that they can restore themselves. And I think it's a good thing for the customer perspective, and certainly a good thing for all of our residents.
Oh, that's great. But you brought up my next topic, which was the saltwater intrusion issue. And speaking of Southold, we just did a project out there when we studied groundwater modeling, where we were modeling the saltwater interface, and it was literally Southold, all right, and we saw how fragile and sensitive and very responsive that aquifer is to pumping. We actually had to model some of your well fields in there too, and see what happens and how it affects, what we're trying to do or the client's trying to do, and we did see, intrusion under certain conditions, and so it is very, very fragile, very sensitive. Especially the way that the aquifer is set up out there with these different layers of clay and lenses of clay and how it reacts. We're also, we're fortunate we're involved with other projects with other municipal water suppliers on the south shore of Nassau County, and they are Lloyd users, all right, and they have very great concerns as that's their only supply. Mm-hmm. Okay, everything else above there is got salt in it already. So we're engaged right now. We're doing another modeling study where we're looking at, how that water, that interface is going to move either horizontally or vertically, and, how can they manage this, or how long do they have until things go salty on them, again, growth and conservation and a few other things. Maybe they have to import water, like you said. But are there other areas of Suffolk County where you guys are experiencing issues with saltwater intrusion, and what are you doing about it?
Yeah, Paul, you really nailed, the two areas in Nassau and Suffolk County on the head. Whether the two that jump to mind most definitely, Southold and the South Shore, Nassau County. That when it comes to saltwater intrusion and the fragile nature of the aquifer related to enough of a supply, those are the two. I think most of your listeners probably don't really understand the difference between the aquifer out east on the eastern end of the island and the aquifer in western Suffolk and certainly in Nassau County, and water availability and each of how that sort of changes as you move across the island.
It does. It really does.
And it's really important. Most of the wells that we have on the east end are relatively small. A fraction of the wells that we, by well capacity, meaning the amount of water that we can pull from the well in order to supply, it's a fraction of what it is in the western half of our service territory. But when it comes to intrusion, it's those two areas. We also, there are times from an infrastructure perspective, we have concerns about our wells on Fire Island.
I was going to ask.
Fire Island, not only from, sort of a climate change perspective and the long-term availability of the wells that serve the residents on Fire Island, but also from saltwater intrusion and some other issues that we have there. So we've been extremely aggressive, again, receiving state assistance to improve the infrastructure there and to harden the infrastructure. But the drinking water quality from those wells is something that we always keep our eye on and struggle with.
Yeah, it's not an easy issue. Like I said, we're currently involved in a project that it's going to be a challenge. If we're just in the beginning stages of it, but if we see that saltwater interface does start migrating towards the supplier's wells, and they do go salty, there's going to be a real issue.
Yeah, and
real issue.
The other thing to point out is, and I think a lot of your listeners may not know this either. It's very interesting, but we don't move water from from Huntington to to Bayport or Brookhaven, or the water that you drink and the water that you get is typically from within a couple of miles of where you live. There's it may be a well field that you're not really sure was is there a piece of property back on that street? You don't really know what's back there. But we try to do a good job of being very quiet but being good neighbors, making sure that our well fields and our properties are in residential areas, but are well maintained and not problematic for customers. But most of the water that people drink is from right around the corner from where they live.
And you mentioned Bayport. That's where I'm from. So yes, and I know where the well fields are. To me they're obvious. But my wife's the school teacher. I'm like, oh, that's a well field. But what are you looking at? There's nothing. I'm like, you guys are very discreet and you're always very, very good neighbors. So I appreciate that too. So we mentioned this. It's a very vulnerable and valuable natural resource. So we kind of touched on conservation, and you mentioned there is a lot of water out there. I think in some of my earlier podcasts, we were talking about some of the LICAP studies and the state of the aquifer, and it talks about like trillions of gallons of water,
Absolutely.
Numbers that are incomprehensible. But are there any efforts from you guys to encourage people to, maybe not use as much,
100%.
Because during, as I said, the irrigation season, right? You guys could get, maybe you don't, but I know some other districts, they do get into some problems when their tanks are down, they don't have the pressure they need. Like I mentioned earlier, if a fire broke out or something like that, you could have some concerns.
Absolutely. We pump about 70% of all of our water for the year between, say, May and September. So if we're pumping, and most of that, Paul, that's from residential irrigation systems, people watering their lawn. The domestic use doesn't typically change throughout the year, right? People cook, people, they have...
They bathe, they clean.
Exactly. So that's, stays pretty standard throughout the course of the year. What drives up use is the home irrigation system and the business irrigation systems. Pools and other things play a role, but it's really the timing of the sprinklers. And although we may have enough water to last generations, we think that we're stewards, and we all need to play a role and to educate the public about the value of water, and that it's not just because we have it, it should not be abused, and we should understand that it's our job to ensure that we're not wasting it. So we've been extremely aggressive at the Water Authority. We've developed a couple of programs to educate the public, and also with LICAP, with the Long Island Commission for Aquifer Protection, when that commission was extended for another 5 years in 2018, we established a conservation subcommittee to focus on bringing attention and changing people's habits long term related to conservation. And this doesn't happen overnight, and it may take, like with anything else, any other branding, any other educational program, it could be generational. But we're committed to making sure that people know the value of water, and that we're here for a short period of time, and we want to make sure that drinking water is available for future generations.
Oh man, that's good to hear. Back when I was shaving, I made the change where I used to let the faucet run and just, the whole time. Now I fill up the basin or the sink, and I try to use less. I've made my own, improvements.
It's smart tips like that, believe it or not. And we have this in-home consultation, this program that's available to all of our customers. We call, it's a Water Wise program, where we send a staffer from the Water Authority to look at your consumption history, to check your account, to sort of pull some information from the customer. How many bathrooms do you have? Kitchen? Do you have an irrigation system? What's the time of use and things like that, to better educate them and to give them pointers on steps that they can take individually to make a difference. The program's been very successful, and we're plan to continue that into 2022 and beyond.
Excellent. And I hopefully only have a couple more questions for you, because this has been fascinating. There's been recent changes to the lead and copper rule. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with this, right? They are looking at it. I think it's in the process, or it has been. It's been revamped, where the lead levels now they've reduced it, right? Before it used to be 15 parts per billion or some, very, very small number. It's going down to 5. How's the Water Authority going to react to this? Is it going to impact you guys? What are you doing to prevent corrosion or treat for it? What are your options?
So, very good question. It's certainly a topic that's going to get a lot of attention moving forward, and only continue to receive media attention, and also attention from the drinking water suppliers and the regulators in having conversations with the public. So the Water Authority has been very much involved in trying to ascertain where the federal government, the EPA, and the health department, where they're headed with this. The first step is creating a sort of an inventory of services. It's very complicated for us because we have over 400,000 connections serving, accounts.
Staggering.
Serving
Staggering.
1.2 million people. But we've developed a program where we're able to get the inventory that's needed in order to. That's the first step. In order to take that portion, put the checkbox on that. We're not, we haven't begun collecting the data. There is still, almost every week it seems like there's a new webinar or some new information coming from
constantly
from regulators, to whether it's a change in what they've been proposing or to provide additional guidance. I think some of the folks who will dictate to the suppliers what they need to do. I think that some of that stuff is still up in the air right now, but we're monitoring it closely. We don't think that it'll be. I know there are agencies across the United States that are I don't want to say intimidated by it, but are dedicating a tremendous amount of resources to ensure that they comply with the new lead and copper rule. We certainly are doing that, but we don't think just because of the makeup of our service territory that it's going to be a task that we can handle.
Excellent. And do you guys mostly focus on pH adjustment, with a caustic or a lime or something to raise the pH?
Well, we have.
What's your
part of our
preferred?
Our historic corrosion control methods. That's something that I think has certainly worked to our advantage.
Absolutely.
And I think moving forward we'll it'll though doing that for so many years to ensure that we comply will be beneficial as we continue to and they start to implement the lead and copper rule. So. There's certainly a lot of discussions going on about it. It's been a hot topic for the Water Authority and certainly the Long Island Water Conference and all the providers. So we're keeping our eye on it and make sure that we'll be at the forefront.
Yeah, we are watching it closely too. We've got a lot of clients that they have, as you mentioned, there's some private wells, and some of them serve. We have hospitals and schools, and some of them, these non-transient, non-community water supplies, and it affects them. So it's been very interesting, and it could be very challenging for somebody that's not hooked up to the Water Authority, which may be another encouragement to
absolutely
to join, so to speak.
I think too the one of the most important things is going to be the dialogue between the agency, the drinking water provider in most cases, and the customer. And, having a clear dialogue and an understanding of the steps that need to be taken, whether it's a replacement of a service line, and the cost of that and who's going to pay for that. But I think having those conversations early and trying to educate the customer base as soon as possible, I think that will obviously be very beneficial moving forward.
Oh boy, yeah, this is going to be interesting when this thing gets finalized. So, as you said, we're keeping an eye on it. So, last question I have, right? So, maybe not so much specifically to water quality or water chemistry or capacity, but more towards your staff, right? There's been labor shortages in many, many different industries right now. Engineering. I could just say, like, if this infrastructure bill comes to fruition, I've been to conferences and I've said this on other podcasts. It's the prediction is we're gonna need about 80,000 more engineers, nationwide to just keep up. And right now we can't keep up. There's more work out there than we can do. So I encourage anyone that's interested in the engineering field, get involved. But, I know a lot of guys at the Water Authority from, the distribution side to construction to the operations to guys like yourself and, some of the hydrogeologists. You guys, very broad, very diverse. Do you have enough staff right now, and do you see into the future needing more?
Great question. We have about 575 active staff. Everything from chemists in our laboratories to engineers in our engineering department, IT staff, customer service, field staff, construction staff, very diverse, very talented and committed. One of the things I want to say, I appreciate, when you work for an agency like the Water Authority, our employees understand our mission and the significance and the significant role that we play in the community. We have struggled at times with recruiting and trying to find a civil engineer to develop plans for construction of a new chemical treatment building and things like that.
We're here for you,
and we love you guys. As I mentioned earlier, you're one of the leading firms, certainly in the region, and we'd love to partner with you if there are opportunities. So that's one obstacle where on the highly technical side, we have struggled in the past with recruiting. Where we're looking for a couple of key positions right now. But I also think we're faced with a large portion of our employee base that is coming up to that 55-year-olds, and 25 years of service or 30 years of service, and they're looking to retire. So not only do we have the challenges of there's the infrastructure money, the state money, there's going to be a lot of work on Long Island, and that's a good thing. But we also are faced with our aging existing staff. So recruiting, retaining, providing incentives for employees, it's something that we're aware of and working on. I'm not s're if we have the answer, to be honest,
if you do, share that silver bullet with me, because
absolutely.
We're about 70 people in my firm. Right now we have about 10 open positions. Think about that. It's just, it is a real challenge. Real challenge. And you mentioned the retention, and it's right now it's hanging on to people. There's been a lot of churn and turnover and people just going because they can go right now. And other firms, trying to, take your talent.
Well, and the thing too that we struggle with is, we're not the private sector, right? We're quasi-governmental. We're a state authority. We don't have taxing ability.
Now, do you have unions? You do.
We do. Yeah. So we have about 2/3 of our 575 employees are represented by. We have a small union in our laboratory, and local 393 represents the bulk of them, and the rest are sort of management exempt employees. So I think that I lost my train of thought there. I apologize.
It's all right.
But we're aware of it. We're doing what we can. We've been implementing succession planning, where we know that key employees plan to leave within the next 6 months or a year, where we have the board support to bring somebody on early and to train under that person, and to be a mentor and to be sort of a tutor for that individual that we think will replace that individual. So we're taking steps, to do what we can to try to minimize the negative effects of losing key staff.
Well, like I said, when you figure it out, I'm all ears, because it has not been easy, and we're trying to do the same thing. We're trying to be very competitive with salaries and benefits and flexibility. I mean, you guys may not have, the same.
That was the point I wanted to make.
When something happens, you guys have to be there. It's not like, I want to work from home today, or I'll work on Saturday, or whatever. I'll get you the 40 hours or whatever you need, but it's going to be on my schedule. That doesn't always work with you guys.
Oh, exactly. So we're a little different, but also from a compensation perspective. We're not the private sector. We have excellent starting salaries and benefits, and you're part of the state retirement system. But we don't give out bonuses. No one gets a company car anymore. There's probably 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5 people left. So some of the things that traditionally were done or can be done in the private sector, they're not really options for the water authority because of how we're structured.
That's totally understandable. That's why my rates are nice and low, right?
Well, we do the best we can.
I totally appreciate that, Jeff. Well, before we wrap up, is there anything you want to mention that we didn't cover today, or something you want to let our listeners know about the Water Authority, or your mission or your vision, or whatever?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think there are just a couple of things. This has been a lot of fun. And I'll tell you, Paul, you do a great job.
Thank you.
I've listened to several of your podcasts, and they're engaging and very interesting. I always learn something. Water Authority, we have our own podcast.
Oh my God, I forgot to say that.
So I do want to promote it. It's called What About Water?
And I've listened to yours. I also enjoy it.
Thank you so much. It's called What About Water. You can find it on all podcast platforms, and YouTube and Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all that. I think we probably agree on this, but when we started our podcast about a year ago, about a year and a half or so, we thought that, this is something that is sort of the next wave of contacting and communicating with our either our customers or our clients, and providing key worthwhile information to them. So it's been successful, and I asked folks to certainly give it a try, and let us know what you think. We also, we're Facebook and Twitter, and people can certainly reach out to us if they have questions about their drinking water, or they want an in-home consultation. You can call the Water Authority at 631-698-9800, and we'll come out, and we'll do everything we can to answer any questions or resolve any problems you might have.
It's good to know. Good to know. And again, I apologize. I meant to plug Jeff's podcast. You guys can listen to the Water Authority and Jeff again at What About Water on all the usual podcast channels and apps, and just like the Environmental Echo here. But again, I want to thank Jeff for coming in and taking the time to speak with us, and to give the listeners a little more insight into the Suffolk County Water Authority, its operations, and its vision for the future here of Long Island, and how we handle water and get it to the residents. But again, I am Paul Boyce, the CEO and president of PW Grocer, and this is the Environmental Echo, the podcast. And so you guys, if you need to reach us again, it is www.pwgrocer.com/podcast. And I want to thank Jeff again, as well as our listeners and subscribers today for joining us. And I hope you guys found this as informative and enjoyable as I did. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.